Fantasy Focus Football is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico and see all the ways you could save. It's Wednesday, August 3rd. Field, Mike, and Daniel here. We got a busy show ahead as we have Double Trouble featuring the Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. Mike is rocking his Eagles Kelly Green homage shirt. Shout out to homage.
Yeah.
We'll also have some news. And gentlemen, that is where we start because one of the realities of training camp is that injuries are a part of them.
Yep.
And injuries struck the Denver Broncos in a unfortunately all too familiar way yesterday as Tim Patrick, who is a really, really good player, who has overcome a lot injury-wise in his career, suffered a torn ACL yesterday. He's going to be obviously out for the season. Mike, at first blush, what are your thoughts that come to mind about what this means for the rest of the Denver offense?
Yeah, first, too bad. A big loss. Probably more of a loss for Denver than it is in fantasy, right? We're talking about Tim Patrick as a late-round flyer, but maybe presents an opportunity for some clarity after Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, right? Because you have KJ Hamler, right, coming back from injury as well, and perhaps he could step into that 3 role, be a nice sleeper late in drafts. But, I mean, honestly, when it comes to projections, rankings, I didn't really move Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. Again, I think it more affects the guys further down the depth chart. I don't think it really affects them. They're already going to play a big role. They're already the highest pedigree, most talented players in that group. So for me, it's about the same.
Interesting, because I sort of feel the opposite. It just seems like
Really?
I just haven't had a lot of confidence in KJ Hamler. What is it that I've seen from him to be able to say? Are you investing? Here's a better question. Are you investing a draft pick in KJ Hamler for fantasy with this Tim Patrick news as somebody that you would start or use as a flex play?
He moves from undraftable to late round flyer. I think in a 12-team league, 10-team, it's kind of closer, but he's in that, right? He's in that like conversation of late in drafts. You're looking for those second or third year receivers or rookie receivers that you could kind of just throw a dart at, put on your bench and see what happens.
I'd rather have someone else, I think.
I think my thoughts from this Tim Patrick injury, again, first of all, really bummed for him, was it sort of like strengthens or emboldens my stance on Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I think in this offense, there is bound to be a top 15 wide receiver by the end of the season. Mm-hmm. They're both really talented guys, and it would have been 3 really talented guys if Tim Patrick was there. But it was going to be hard for us to know going into the year which of the 3 was most likely to be the wide receiver 1, because really any of the 3 of them could have been. Now we've narrowed it down. I have Cortland Sutton ahead of Jerry Jeudy in my rankings. I've got him right at wide receiver 20, and I feel a little stronger about that today than I did a couple of days ago. I've got Jeudy at wide receiver 26. And if you're asking me why I have Cortland Sutton over Jerry Jeudy, I think Jerry Jeudy has a higher ceiling as an NFL player. I just have a little bit more of a foundation and a base of knowledge when it comes to Cortland Sutton, a guy who, at his very best, can be one of the best vertical receivers in the NFL. And what do you know about Russell Wilson? One of the best vertical throwers in the NFL. So I think Cortland Sutton is probably a stronger play now. Unfortunately, very difficult news for Tim Patrick, who is one of Cortland Sutton's very best friends. So a bummer for Tim Patrick. There was a time in Tim Patrick's life where he was unable to walk for 4 months because of a massive knee injury early in his football playing careers. He's going to bounce back stronger. We're at this point of the preseason where we could almost do news or noise every single day. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of like do like a modified brief news or noise. And this comes from the Athletic's Mark Caboli, who reports that quarterback Mitch Trubisky for the Steelers, quote, really hasn't been sharp while getting all of the first team reps. I think sort of 2 notable things there. The part that he hasn't been so great. But Daniel, he has been the first team quarterback. Does this matter to you, the fact that the quarterbacks in general in Pittsburgh have not been great?
So I'm not drafting either one of these quarterbacks as someone that I'm going to use in fantasy this year. It's more so what are they going to do for the pass catchers there? Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and even the running back, with Najee Harris and being able to get his volume. So to me, I don't care which one of these guys is under center. I just want the team to pick a quarterback and be able to see what they're going to be able to help the skill position players with, because can he pick it down the road in Dynasty? Maybe. But this year, he's not a guy that I'm looking at all in redraft leagues.
Doesn't change anything. We were already expecting bad quarterback play here, right? Bad offensive line play. I mean, this is what we had last season. This is what we expected this season. It's a shaky situation. Yep. Mitch Trubisky lost his starting job for a reason and was a backup last year for a reason. I didn't expect him to come out and play well in camp. I just didn't. So it's as expected. And look, as for someone like Deontay Johnson, I mentioned this stat before, top 4 in targets over the last 2 seasons, bottom 4 in yards per target. He already wasn't efficient, and he was still very productive in fantasy. So, I mean, it's not ideal circumstances, but does it move the needle at all, this report? No, not at all.
Am I misreading something? Because that first stat matters a lot to me that you mentioned with Deontay Johnson. Top 4 in targets over the past 2 years. We're always hunting opportunity in fantasy. Mm-hmm. I've got him at 13 in my wide receiver rankings, and that's 6 spots ahead of ESPN consensus ranks. That's a fairly notable gap in that portion of the wideout ranks. are you suggesting that the downside is just yards per catch and touchdown equity?
I have his touchdowns coming down quite a bit. I think he was a little lucky in that department, but again, the volume will still be there. So can he be a wide receiver 2 again, or a good wide receiver 2? Absolutely. I think so. He'll get the volume.
Maybe I'm missing the boat here. I just like the stability you're getting for Deontay Johnson. Like you are seeing somewhere between 7 and 10 targets almost every single week. And as you sort through some of those players that are not that far behind him in the ranks, you've got guys like Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, who also have quarterback question marks, right? Geno Smith and Carson Wentz, not necessarily, exactly all-pro quarterbacks, at least at this stage of their career. So I think I actually feel fine about Deontay Johnson. This news is interesting. I think it strikes me more as noise for fantasy than it is news for fantasy. This one also comes from The Athletic. Zach Rosenblatt does a nice job covering the Jets. Writes, quote, that Elijah Moore seems to have firmly established himself as the number 1 wide receiver. We have a massive range of ranks on Elijah Moore right now on ESPN. Eric Carabell has him all the way up at 21. Mike, you have him at 40. You guys are the two tent poles here. You're lowest, he's highest.
Yeah.
So explain your stance.
Yeah, so I like Elijah Moore, and I was all in on him. I would have ranked him around 20. I did have him ranked around 20 before the draft, but talked about this before. We have a lot of history on first-round wide receivers, especially those picked in the first half of the draft, or first half of the first round, and they get a lot of volume, right? Garrett Wilson is going to be heavily involved, and maybe it takes him a little time, right? We're just starting training camp. Maybe in a few weeks he establishes himself as a number 1, but he's going to play a big role no matter what. You have more. Corey Davis isn't just going to disappear. He's going to play a role. Braxton Berrios was re-signed. He's going to play a role in the slot as well. They brought in 3 tight ends. Yeah. He drafted 1. They signed 2. Michael Carter out of the backfield. They have to get the ball in the hands of Breece Hall. And is the offense even good? We don't know how good their quarterback is right now, right? So this could be a below-average offense with a lot of mouths to feed. I'm a little worried about that, so that's why he's down a little further. And again, I have Garrett Wilson ahead. I think Garrett Wilson takes control as the 1 pretty quickly.
I think Elijah Moore is the lowest rated wide receiver 1 on my board. When you look across teams, I think he is probably the lowest rated starting number 1 wide receiver for the team. And it's just like, to your point, I don't need to say a whole lot more. Like I don't know what the Jets are. There's so many wide range of outcomes. I'd rather have someone that I feel like is going to give me more consistency than just who knows what with where I'm taking Elijah Moore.
This feels like a Kyle project, but I wonder if you were to look at the last 5 years, and let's call it 8, the bottom quarter of the NFL in terms of scoring offenses, like points per game, and like how many top 10 quarterbacks, top 30 wide receivers, top 20 running backs, and top 8 tight ends they've produced. And I would bet the number is fairly low, right? So if you don't believe this Jets offense is going to be in that bottom 8, then maybe you have a little bit more confidence. But if you do believe this could be like another year of growth for this offense, then perhaps, and they're not going to be great, then perhaps you should be a little bit skittish on ranking a player too high. I've got him at 37, Mike, so I'm not that far away from you in the rankings. This is the vaunted head coach quote that we just don't like to see. Over the weekend, Rams head coach Sean McVay was describing his running backs, in this case referencing Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, and saying, quote, "I look at it as we've got 2 starting backs."
What? No. Field.
Don't like it. Don't like it at all, Daniel. And I get it. This is in line with something that Mike referenced recently, that we are seeing fewer and fewer and fewer teams willing to commit almost exclusively to 1 back. You buying it, Daniel?
Do I buy that Sean McVay is going to do this? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Do you not buy it?
I'll hear you out. Go ahead. I definitely don't, but go ahead.
Okay. I just saw last year when Cam Akers was out, I saw Darrell Henderson he looked, I think, serviceable in that role. Not ideal, but serviceable. And Cam Akers, I think there's still some question marks, especially given the injury history around him. So if I'm the Rams, I want Cam Akers to be healthy. I want to be healthy all season long because I have an offense and a team that I think is going to go hopefully deep into the playoffs. So yeah, if I can have someone like Darrell Henderson to be able to help split time and do a committee to help keep Cam Akers healthy long-term, I think there's at least an option where that makes sense because Darrell Henderson, at least in my mind, he's not a scrub.
No, he's not at all. But Sean McVay has showed us his cards many, many times. And his cards are, I like one guy, right? Todd Gurley, obviously an extremely good talent. You kind of understood that, right? But even last year, Darrell Henderson to start the season, 75% or so of the snaps and carries. Then he goes out. Sony Michel playing 90% of the snaps over for a month. And then Cam Akers comes back off a torn Achilles when you're like, he'll just get a few touches, right? Just mix him in. No, full on workload. I mean, 20 some carries. He has shown that. I think he's dedicated to Cam Akers, and he might say that he wants to mix Darrell Henderson, and he will. Don't look. He's going to mix him in a little bit. He'll have a role, probably a change of pace back, some passing down work. But Cam Akers, I think, will be the guy, and I'm sticking with that. I hope Cam Akers' ADP comes down further because I think he's already a bit of a value right now.
I agree.
And
with
there's a chance for him to be an extreme value, a major breakout candidate. Remember, before the season last year, I know we don't want to get too deep on this, but before the season last year, before Akers got hurt, the backfield is basically the same situation. It was Akers and Henderson. We were all in on Akers, right? He was a RB1, a breakout, all this touchdown upside, and we're knocking him because he had the rough playoffs against elite run defenses, right? It was a really bad situation, tough break for him. I think he breaks out this year.
It's also 5 months removed from an Achilles tear. Right. So I don't know that I would have expected whatever it was, like 2.5 yards per carries in some of those games, but still, like a guy that's 5 months removed from an Achilles, probably not fully formed. I hope that there's no residual impact as we get to this season. It sounds like Cam Akers is running back at full strength. There's some news. We'll have some more news probably every single day as we survey what's taking place around camps. But it's time now for us to dive into Double Trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble. Double trouble.
As of this moment, they're on double secret probation.
Before we get into Double Trouble, Mike, the Vegas win forecast for the Eagles is 9.5 wins. Why are they 6 wins shy of what they're actually going to win?
Yeah, I know that, right? I don't understand this. Best team in the league. Howie Roseman doing a nice job. Look, I actually do think they're in good shape on paper. I think the big question mark is the obvious one, the guy we're going to talk about in a minute, Jalen Hurts. But I have the Eagles based on current roster evaluations with the easiest projected schedule in the NFL this season. The East just has a light schedule, and the Eagles kind of headline it. So I am on the over here. Not biased. Sometimes I'm under on the Eagles. Sometimes I'm over. I am optimistic this year. I'm at 10.4 wins, so I would take the over on the Eagles.
That's tough. You have them at 10.4, but just week one.
I had him at 10.37 for the record.
Like week one, they're definitely going to lose. So I think they're probably at more like 9.4 because I think.
What are they playing? A good team like Buffalo or something? Or
isn't it? Oh, that's the Lions.
The Lions.
You remember they restored the roar?
Did they win a game last year? They tied one. They tied that game. That's what it was. Okay.
I hate you.
They had that tie.
Everything about you as a human is my favorite thing in the world, but in this moment, we are mortal enemies.
Wow.
We're going to need a side bet or something leading
That's
up to
right.
week one.
Yes,
That's going to be
The
fun.
meanest Daniel Dopp has ever been in his
I know.
entire life. Let's dive into the Eagles, and we begin with the quarterback. That is, of course, Jalen Hurts, who comes in terms of the consensus ranks at ESPN as quarterback 6. ADP is quarterback 7. Mike has him at 7. I have him at quarterback 6, so slightly more optimistic. This, to me, feels like a fairly straightforward one, is that Jalen Hurts has one of the highest floors of any quarterback in fantasy this season, and I think his ceiling is greater than you might realize. Last year, he led all quarterbacks in rushes, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns. 2 of those 3 categories are likely to sustain no matter what. It's really easy for us to project him to run the ball a lot and run the football very effectively. Scoring 10 rushing touchdowns for any player, especially a quarterback, is hard to keep up year over year, but the floor is immeasurably high here, Mike. And if this guy just turns the corner a little bit as a passer with much better weapons around him, the passing upside could be good enough that he could challenge to be in that very elite tier of quarterbacks that we talk about as the very, the Mahomes and the Allens and the Lamars and the Herberts and the Bradys.
Yeah, no doubt. QB7 last season, and he was not in the top 20 in pass attempts or passing yards or passing touchdowns. Only had 16 passing touchdowns. I am projecting a bump of about 7 in that department, maybe a slight downgrade in rushing touchdowns this year, to your point. But, my projections love him. I mean, it's hard to knock him down. The problem is this. You say he's a high floor player. On a week-to-week basis, that's exactly right. There's no doubt about it. If you have him and he's starting, you feel good about it. My question is, does he make a leap forward this season and play better, or does he maybe level off or regress and they decide at some point, passing game's not working? Should we give Gardner Minshew a couple starts or something? That's at least, it's more of a risk for him than it is with any other player. And remember, they have a lot of first-round picks next year. They're thinking about, they'll at least have a fallback plan if they want to go that direction. Maybe they take a look at Minshew during the fantasy playoffs. You know what I mean? If they're underwhelming, that's a risk with him that you do not have with other first-round quarterbacks. That's why I wouldn't put him like 3rd, or 5th, right? That's why I'm knocking him down to like 7th or 8th in my rankings. But again, week to week, you feel great having him.
Yeah, that makes it seem more scary than I was just excited about Jalen Hurts. But I understand all the things that you're saying and the idea that, listen, 22 of his carries came inside the 10-yard line last year. Like, obviously, we're saying can't predict touchdowns, but knowing that they utilize him specifically at the goal line as a runner, if he takes that next step forward at all as a pass catcher, this is Jalen Hurts taking the next step into this echelon.
Here's one last good and bad stat for Jalen Hurts. He had 10 rushing touchdowns last year. 5 of them were on quarterback sneaks. The good side of that is that if they get close, he's going to get an opportunity on some cases.
Yep.
The bad side of that is that 5 touchdowns from basically the 1-yard line and in, that's hard for anybody that's not named like Derrick Henry or Jonathan Taylor to do every single season.
Well, the one positive about this, though, is that it's not like he has a running back that's taking away any kind of rushing volume or touches from him.
Interesting.
By the way, I do have him with 9 projected rushing touchdowns.
Okay,
so one off.
Wow,
So he's
small regression only. Yeah, right. That's again really like this player for fantasy. Last season, he had the longest streak amongst quarterbacks to begin the year with at least 20 fantasy points in every game. So if you're looking for a high floor, that's not even a floor. That's like a high. What's like in between a floor and a ceiling? It's a high staircase. I don't know.
Second floor. I don't
Second
know.
floor. Mike's got a lot of floors in his house, so like this is
The
like
middle
this
floor of the mansion
floor
on my
of
property.
the palatial estate. All right, let's keep things moving here, Daniel.
Yeah, I want to talk about Miles Sanders because Miles Sanders was on a podcast earlier this offseason. Was asked how fantasy managers should go about approaching Miles Sanders, and he basically said, well, I wouldn't draft me if the team isn't going to give me the ball in positions to be able to put me in a spot to score points. And I don't know, with everything that I've seen from Miles Sanders over the last couple of years, fantastic runner. Drafted, top 10 draft pick? Is that true?
Second round pick.
Second round pick. Okay.
Yeah.
So second round pick. But the idea of he's just at this spot where I have no idea what to make of Miles Sanders, and he falls in that dead zone for me where if I get to him and he's one of my starters, I think again I've made a mistake.
Yeah. I feel like he's at the end of that tier where I'm like, if I end up, let's say I go, heavy on receivers and he ends up as my RB2, I'm like, you know what? Might be okay, right? I think there's a chance. I'm optimistic for a bounce back, and there's a few reasons here. First of all, to your point, again, yards per carry, don't want to get too caught up in it, right? But top 15 all 3 seasons, right? Out of a sample of 90, 100 running backs, right? Pretty good. Has struggled a little bit the last 2 years in the passing game. But check out how unlucky he was in the touchdown department, right?
How many did he have?
He had 0 touchdowns.
That feels
last
unlucky,
year.
yeah.
The Eagles led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. They had
crazy.
25. Their lead back had 0 touchdowns.
Is that unlucky though?
Yes.
Are you? But like they're designing runs for Jalen Hurts at the goal line. I mean, he has 22 carries. Like that doesn't seem like unlucky.
Yeah.
That seems like they're designing. They want Jalen Hurts to run the ball.
But that's why we look at expected touchdowns, right? Carries inside the 5, that kind of thing. And he should have had 5, 6 touchdowns based on his usage, right? His
Eagles just
expected
hate
touchdown
him.
total. No, it's just bad luck. He got the carries there. It just didn't convert. It happens. There's bad luck all the time. I mean, you think about Calvin Johnson, Andre Johnson, Julio Jones, some of the best players in the NFL over the past decade, and they have big swings and touchdowns. It happens. It's just the nature of the beast. Would not surprise me at all if he came back and scored 8 touchdowns this year, 9 touchdowns. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either. Talented guy. We'll see on the workload, right? That's the part that I just don't know specifically, right? I mean, they have enough backfield depth. Not like they have one of the top insurance policies at running back, but they have enough guys that have gotten some burn in the past couple of seasons. And last year, maybe in part due to health, he had just 4 games last year with 15 or more touches. He had 5 games with 10 or fewer touches. But maybe we learned something at the end of last season. In the final 2 games that he was healthy for Miles Sanders, 47 total touches and 288 yards. So maybe the committee earlier on in the year was just managing his health and Nick Sirianni finding his groove as a head coach for the first time. But I think like running back 25 right now on ES feels kind of on the money for me.
Yeah.
I don't want him to be my top back. I can live with him as my second back. If I'm going 0 RB strategy, I could see him being the player that I take with my first running back pick.
I think he beats my ranking. I do. I think he beats us out. That's my take.
Okay.
I'm feeling optimistic. I think
Mike's
he's just too good.
right, Mike.
And I
Mike
somewhat
Kelly.
disagree. I think you have good backup running backs. I think Sanders is your clear best back, and I think he shows it this year.
Yeah, but
that's my take.
You disagree with the idea that they have a good backup running back?
I think they're good. They're fine backups.
Right, no,
I don't think
they don't have a Nick
threats.
Chubb or a Jamal Williams a Kareem Hunt or a Jamal Williams or somebody like A.J. Dillon who's like going to share the load evenly with him.
Right. I think they're overrated in terms of being real threats to his lead back job.
Yeah,
I think
fine.
that's noise. I think he'll establish himself as the one, get 15 or so carries, a handful of targets a game, and be a serviceable fantasy starter in
Do
RB2.
you know who had more carries inside the 10-yard line than Nick Chubb last year?
Daniel Dopp.
Jalen Hurts.
Then Nick Chubb or then Miles Sanders? Then Nick Chubb?
Than Nick Chubb.
Wow.
He had more carries inside the 10-yard line than Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
David Montgomery, Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
I'm out on Miles Sanders as a runner because of all the things that they utilize with Jalen Hurts. That's just a me thing, though. I'm excited to see it. Please, I hope I'm wrong.
We'll see. You'll see him week 1.
I
That's what
am.
you'll see.
Oh, please. I am stoked, though, about A.J. Brown. I really want to talk about this because A.J. Brown is one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL. I think my big question is, with the transition from Tennessee coming over to the Eagles, is there enough with Jalen Hurts under center that he can be viewed as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy drafts this year? Or is there still too many question marks with Jalen Hurts as a passer that he's just not quite there yet?
I'm not sure the last show I've been on of this podcast where I haven't talked about A.J. Brown, so I'm going to let you take the lead on this because I keep repeating the same thing.
So, yeah, I think we've talked about it aplenty, but I think we are in lockstep here. So you guys certainly correct me or disagree if you don't see it this way. But first of all, there are like 15 guys who are capable of being top 10 wide receivers going into the season, right? There are certainly many more that could finish as top 10 wide receivers, but I can make a case for them. There are enough mitigating factors for A.J. Brown to not be inside my top 10 of wide receiver rankings. I have him at wide receiver 14. Those mitigating factors that he plays in one of the run-heaviest offenses in the NFL, and a quarterback that we have some question marks as it pertains to his throwing ability in Jalen Hurts. And he actually has like legitimate pieces around him where his target share may not be as gargantuan as it was in Tennessee last year at 27%. Those are the mitigating factors. Here are the factors that work in A.J. Brown's favor. He's freaking awesome, and he's A.J. Brown, and he's super talented. And anytime he has the ball in his hands, he could go 75 yards and score a touchdown. Almost any single play for A.J. Brown. So I have him at 14, and it feels like moving him further down the ranks, like any further down the ranks, would be a really tough thing for me to do. I'd have to be like the world's biggest Giants fan who just hated the Eagles on principle, or have something like maybe a personal vendetta against A.J. Brown. I'm neither of those things. So I have him at wide receiver 14. I can't justify moving him down any further. I could justify moving him up a little bit further, but at what cost? Who are you moving down, right? The first 13 wide receivers on the board are awesome. It's like you're moving him down, or are you replacing Mike Evans? Are you replacing Keenan Allen? Like, these guys are awesome too. So I like A.J. Brown a ton. You might have to live with like a little bit more up and down than some of the guys that are ahead of him, but he's going to end up at the end of the year being a player you're very happy to have on your roster.
I really quickly want to say, Mike, and I want you to join in here. Field, we talked yesterday when we were doing Double Trouble about how all we want for Terry McLaurin is just to give him opportunities, just put the ball in his hands. And I feel like if somebody would ever just put the ball in A.J. Brown's hands enough, like the dude would dominate, but it's always been a lack of touches. He's just never been out there running enough routes. He's never had enough targets from that standpoint. I'm really hoping that changes here in Philly, Mike.
Yeah, just a low volume offense, and that's going to hurt his ceiling. But again, he's just so good. I mean, this guy is, since he's been in the league, he's top 7 in yards per outrun, yards after the catch, yards per target. Yeah. Like he's super awesome. Efficient, scores a lot of touchdowns. Those are the good things, but does he have that ceiling of the guys you were talking about that are in our top 10? I don't think so. I think it's just too low volume of an offense, much like in Tennessee. And again, he has more competition for targets here. So that's my case for why he's kind of a good, maybe a mid-range wide receiver too. I don't think he'll crack the top 10.
I like that. I've been grabbing A.J. Brown. I feel like when I've been doing drafts, if I go running back, he's a guy that I often have been able to try and find in the 3rd round as my wide receiver 1, assuming I went heavy.
Probably even lower than that, right? Probably in the 4th round with the way.
Late 3rd, early 4th.
Early 4th. That seems about.
He's fun though. He's a fun guy to have on your team, right? You want some exciting big plays. He catches it, dodges a few guys, breaks some tackles, goes the distance. That you're gonna love him.
All right. So speaking of big plays, like last year, DeVonta Smith. Right? We had all of this excitement around this rookie coming out of Alabama, what it is they can be in this offense. Yeah. He had 6 targets in 11 of 17 games as a rookie. We all expected that to continue and have a further maturation process this year. And then A.J. Brown gets traded. So how does A.J. Brown, period, just affect the value of DeVonta Smith this year in fantasy?
Yeah, it definitely hurts his ceiling a little bit. Same kind of thing, right? There's still how many balls to go around in the passing game, right? It's going, even if they pass the ball more, you're still going to have at least a balanced offense, probably leans towards the run, and you're going to have a scrambling quarterback, and you have other mouths to feed here. So it hurts him a little bit. And also, it's his role, right? He was 8th in average depth of target last season, right? This is a vertical target, which is going to mean low volume naturally. It's going to lead to big plays. But especially in a balanced or run-first offense, it limits your ceiling, especially in PPR. Now, maybe you give him a little bump in non-PPR, but in PPR, does he have a path to getting that big volume that he needs? I don't think so. It's almost like like a Mike Evans issue, right? But Mike Evans is with Tom Brady and the second most pass attempts in the NFL and scored all them touchdowns, and it allowed him to still be a top 10 receiver. With Smith, it's not quite the same offense, but it's a similar issue with being that vertical target.
I think here's the path, is that this is one of the greatest wide receivers we've ever seen at the college level in quite some time. I mean, he won the Heisman Trophy. He won basically every major individual award during his final season at Alabama. The guy has an incredible catch radius. He's good after the catch. He's fast. He has basically all the tools to be a great wide receiver. He just is only 1 year into his NFL career. That would be the path, right? Because I agree with Al Mike is saying in terms of like the structure of the offense and the opportunities that he's going to get, as opposed to guys who might have, would you rather have 5 targets way down the field, or would you rather have 10 or 11 that are within 15 yards line of scrimmage? For our purposes, you'd probably prefer the latter here. So that's the path, though, is that like I don't want to lose track of the fact that almost every year there's a breakout player in a second year. I mean, there's actually a lot of them in the NFL. DeVonta Smith could be amongst those candidates.
Heck yeah.
I've got him at wide receiver 39, though, so I'm baking in all the realities that Mike suggested.
But this is like literally to your point. How good do we think DeVonta Smith is? And he's wide receiver 39 heading into the season. And if you told me at the end of the year he's a top 25 wide receiver, easy, I wouldn't shake an eye at that. Like if the right things broke out for him, like that's definitely possible.
Yeah, he was arguably as good as Jalen Waddle last year, and Jalen Waddle was a top 15 fantasy receiver. It was just different circumstances.
Yep.
This is a numbers game, right? It's PPR. You get a point for a catch. It really doesn't matter how effective you are if you just keep catching the ball, right? So different roles. Waddle, possession guy, helped in PPR. Smith, a downfield weapon in a run-heavy offense, didn't have the volume to really get over the top and be a top 15, top 20 wide receiver, whereas Waddle did.
All right, last question here on the Eagles. We've talked about how they're such a run-heavy team, about how, they don't have a ton of balls to be able to go around. And now we've got Dallas Goedert, a tight end, when we've just talked about A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith as the 2 top pass catchers in an offense that already doesn't have enough passes to go around. Yeah. How the heck do you look at Dallas Goedert from a fantasy standpoint? Because is he closer to I could start him as a tight end 8, or is he one of those guys that this is a low volume passing offense and it's not who I would want to be starting at tight end this year?
Yeah, may depend on his target share, right? Because last season, you look at the 9 full games without Zach Ertz, he had a 26% target share,
huge.
Which is like Travis Kelce wishes he got that. You know what I mean? Like that is big time. That's a little over 6 targets per game. He was the number 6 scoring fantasy tight end. And look, he's had 3 straight top 12 fantasy seasons and has never cleared 5 touchdowns. So I think there is room for him to be a mid-range tight end one.
Yeah, I'm a little bit less optimistic because you used 2 numbers there that I think are really important. The good one was that a 26% target share. And what was the average number of targets?
6.1. Right.
6.1.
But for a tight end,
sure. No, I get it. I'm just saying.
Can be a tight end 1 with that? Yes.
Yeah. Yes, you can be a tight end 1. But I think people are wondering, like, on talent alone, he's in the same breath or category as guys like Dalton Schultz and TJ Hawkinson, I would argue, that are sort of on that periphery, like not quite the Kittle, Kelsey, Waller, Pitts tier.
Agreed. Yeah.
But also, like, you feel good about them as a starter. On talent, Dallas Goedert is there. I just don't know if the volume is going to stand up just because of the offense, right? And a 6.1 targets per game with a 26% target share. Like, he's a huge part of the game, of the passing game, and yet only 6 targets.
So, yeah. Target share will go down, but overall pass volume will go up a little bit. I think I don't think they will. Remember, when Goedert was the one, when Ertz was gone, that was when they were extremely run heavy too, which is part of why the target share is so high. It'll be a little bit more balanced. Again, it's still, I think, going to be more of a run-oriented offense, but I still think, and you agree, I mean, we're both at 8.
Yeah,
right?
we're
both at 8, right? We still agree that he's kind of a mid-range, maybe in a 10-team, more of a back-end tight end one. I think he's fine, and I think he'll be a high-floor player, too.
I'm also kind of optimistic that passing around the league will be up this year, just because if I were to look at the league at large, it feels like there's a greater distribution of talent than in recent years. Right, like there are a lot of teams in the AFC that think they're a playoff-ready team. How many of them are trying to win with like just defense and running the football? The answer is like probably the Colts, probably the Titans.
The Titans, yeah.
But like other than that, almost maybe the Browns because of Deshaun Watson's suspension. But again, like when you have Deshaun Watson, you don't run the football 50 times a game.
That'll
right?
change after week 6.
Yeah, so I think almost every team in the AFC that's in the playoff mix wants to throw it a ton. And in the NFC, there's there are fewer teams that are going to be really, really good this year. But of the ones that are, like, they want to run the football a lot less than they throw the football as well. So I could see passing being up in general in the NFL. We're going to talk about the Giants in just a second part of our Double Trouble. Before we do, a quick word from both NerdWallet and Geico. Daniel, you're up first.
You bet. When it comes to choosing the top running back, wide receiver, quarterback, even which defense is right for your team in any given week, you know where to turn. But when you're trying to decide on the right credit card for your wallet, the right mortgage lender for your dream home, or the right savings account, where do you go?
I don't know.
Where?
The nerds at NerdWallet are here to help you make a smart financial decision. NerdWallet is a personal finance site run by money nerds. Think people who are obsessed about personal finance as we are about fantasy sports. And these people want to share their knowledge with our listeners to help them find the right financial products for them. Let's say you're looking for new rewards credit card, all right? NerdWallet can help you compare cashback cards side by side so you can feel confident choosing the one that suits your spending. Think of them like your weekly wide receiver PPR ranks, but you're comparing top credit cards that work for you. So are you ready to make a financial decision? Compare and find top credit cards, savings accounts, and more at nerdwallet.com. NerdWallet, the smartest decision for all your financial decisions. NerdWallet, compare Inc. NMLS 1617539. NerdWallet is not an investment advisor, nor an investment broker. Information is for educational purposes only.
Daniel, Geico has a question for you.
All right, I'm ready.
How would you love a chance to save some money on insurance?
What? Yes!
Of course you would. After all, who doesn't love a great deal, right?
Yep.
And when it comes to great rates on insurance for all the things in your life, Geico can help. Like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle. Hey, you have one of those.
I do.
Boat and RV. Even help with homeowners insurance, condo, or renters coverage. You could save even more with the special discount when you bundle your coverages. Plus, at the easy-to-use Geico mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance and more, and choosing to switch to Geico becomes an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save with great rates and discounts. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com to get a rate quote or contact your local agent and get started seeing how much you could save.
Hey, great job, Mike.
Yeah, it was okay.
done.
C minus.
You know what? I was going to say C- too.
Yeah,
I was.
yes.
All right.
All right.
I didn't want to be mean, though. Again,
I thought you
I
would
was
be.
already-
We should get grades on the reads.
You want to do grades on the reads?
We should do.
All right. We'll start
It's
grading.
important. I
them.
grade everything. I need Excel sheets. I need averages.
you grade the show?
Expected grades.
Do you grade the show after we're done?
Did you grade your co-hosts? How does that work?
That'd be
Oh, yeah,
great.
that's a good question. Do you grade your co-host?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Let's just say yeah and just leave
plead the
it.
fifth?
Yeah.
Beyond that, I plead
I
the fifth.
had some calls yesterday. Had some talks. Sent out some.
Yeah,
Did
poolside.
you guys get texts from me? Yes?
Yikes.
No.
You got a
Didn't see
text.
a
Did you
thing.
get
I got a text. Yeah.
That's weird.
That's
Hear a
tough.
thing. Wow.
Yikes.
Daniel got a text.
I did get a text. I even
There's a note.
responded to it.
You did actually.
I did.
You are a horrible responder. Of
Thank
text.
you.
I
What?
mean, just.
I mean,
You just-
I
you
am.
almost never.
I'm a
It's
bad
like-
responder to texts.
Yeah, you respond to as many texts as like MVS catches as targets,
Oh,
right? It's like
wow.
maybe 50-50.
You know what it
It's
is? I just love personal relationships, like one-on-one, like real, tangible, like text messages.
But I'll be like, hey, Daniel, great job, man. You're doing an awesome job. Just nothing.
So
Crickets.
Like,
wow,
we're-
thanks, man.
We're going
Like,
to talk about the Giants, but MVS just catching strays. Is
Yeah,
that an
yeah, a lot
inside
of
joke
strays.
that I don't understand. Like, out of
don't know.
nowhere,
It
Mike
came-
just throws a shot at MVS. Let's
Yeah,
talk about
it's-
the Giants, shall we?
is what it is.
Vegas likes them for 7 wins this year. Over
Yeesh.
or under, Mike?
7 wins, I'm going under.
Yeah,
I
same
actually
here.
do have them, again, like the Eagles with a light schedule, but I'm at 6.2 wins, just not there yet. They still
Daniel?
have work to do.
I also have them at 6.2 wins, ironically.
No, you don't. You lied.
What
you
is your
copied me.
formula? What is your formula?
Whatever
look like?
Mike says, I just say the same thing afterwards.
Okay, gotcha.
That's
Yeah,
my
it's
formula.
basically mine as well.
Yeah.
I have them for under as well. I think the arrow is trending up for this organization.
Yeah,
it's
sure,
just
yeah,
going to take some time.
Yep.
Let's begin with the quarterback, though. And I'm going to ask the question that I eventually am going to answer myself. So Brian Daboll was hired as the head coach after a tremendous run with the Buffalo Bills, specifically over the past 2 seasons. How much has he raised the value of not just Daniel Jones, Mike, but the offense in general?
I mean, honestly, I don't want to undercut Brian Daboll here. They could have hired Field Yates to coach this team, and it had to be better than it was, right? I mean, they just were not scoring at all. Like, it was just so bad for years. But I think Daboll was a terrific hire. I think he can get them over the top and get them to maybe an average offense this season, maybe even an above average offense, because I had a lot of concerns about Josh Allen. Josh Allen had a lot of concerns with Josh Allen coming into the NFL. I talked to him at the Combine that year. He knew he had things to work on. He goes with Brian Daboll in Buffalo, and he turns him into a star player in the NFL. Yeah. And Daniel Jones has shown signs of being really good, especially the first month last season. He was playing really well. He was a really good fantasy quarterback, and then everything just fell apart before he got injured late in the season. So I think he helps a lot. This gives me a lot of optimism that Daniel Jones, who has the tools, can be a star in the NFL and certainly in fantasy.
What does that mean, though, for this year? Can I ask? Like, I hear all of the things you're saying about how it's going to be better for the offense. Brian Dable's going to do this, but does that mean that Daniel Jones is draftable? Does that mean that he's a guy in 2 quarterback leagues? Like, where is it that you're looking at Daniel Jones this year in fantasy?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, I have him QB 20, right? Yeah. So we're not going too nuts here, but does he have top 12 upside? I think so. I mean, I think if you wait at the position, you want to take a late round flyer, I'm fine with it.
Okay, so I am a little less optimistic that things are going to turn around as fast as you are, Mike, only because, and I understand the analog between Josh Allen and Daniel Jones. Josh, I think, showed much sooner in his career than Daniel has through 3 seasons. I mean, Josh got paid after his 3rd season in the NFL, right? $43 million per year. So that was a breakout year in year 3. Now I get it. The infrastructure was much better in Buffalo, a star receiver in Stephon Diggs that played like a star as well. All those factors I am mindful of. I'm just a little less optimistic about Daniel Jones as a player. Inconsistent decision-making. We know that has plagued him during his career. So for fantasy, is there upside? Yes, because we saw it, as Mike referenced, last year. The first month, he was averaging 23.5, like some ridiculous amount of fantasy points per game through the first 4 weeks. That also included elite rushing early in the season. Really good for that first month. So there are things that make Daniel Jones this is not Blake Bortles. We used to joke about this all the time with Blake Bortles back in the day in Jacksonville. Not a great real quarterback, certainly passable in fantasy. So there's a chance, but I'm a little bit concerned about this offense and on the whole, like coming together, maybe mostly because of the offensive line. I know it's improved. Certainly Evan Neal will help them, but I'm still like tapping the brakes a little bit on this offense making a huge leap this year. This team is going to get there. Like, I believe Brian Daboll is the right person to steer them there in time. It might be more of a 2023 conversation for me than 2022.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I don't think they're going to make a huge leap, but I think that they can be, say, average in touchdowns, maybe a little below average in touchdowns. But again, to your point, I have him with over 400 rushing yards projected and a handful of rushing touchdowns. It's big in fantasy, and that's enough to get him up there he has 1,000 rushing yards since 2019. That's 6th the quarterback. I mean,
I think a little below average. I would be a little below average in terms of total touchdowns scored this year.
Fair enough. I mean, we're talking late round dart throws, right?
Sure. Yes.
Especially 12-team leagues.
That's fair. Yeah.
Zach Wilson territory, also, Carson Wentz. Like, probably he's more upside than a lot of those guys. Matt Ryan.
I want to say this, too,
for sure,
about Daniel Jones. The idea of with what you're describing, to me, is a guy that, especially if you're looking for a late stack, if you play best ball.
Yes, good call.
Like, Daniel Jones is a great late stack in best ball because of what that potential upside could be. It's very, very great value.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of them the other ends of the stack batteries here in a second, but I agree.
Kind of interesting, right? Yeah. Let's talk, though, about Saquon Barkley. So,
no thanks. What year is it? I
wasn't going to bring it up.
I totally forgot until you just said it.
Not going to say it. Mike was obviously very bullish on Saquon Barkley going into last season, and things did not pan out. But I think the risk has been reduced with Saquon Barkley this year because as of this conversation, his ADP is 16th amongst running backs. That's a little bit higher than where I have him ranked. I have him at RB20. Mike has him at RB15. So let me start with this premise before we get into the cost. What kind of player do you believe Saquon Barkley to be? Because I think he is an elite talent, but there's as specific, or especially with running backs, well, especially with a lot of players, it's not just elite talent, right? It's elite talent plus the surroundings that allow you to take advantage of that elite talent. Yep. I think he's a really, really talented guy. I saw a tweet this morning from the CBS NFL account posting early career Saquon highlights, and he was jaw-dropping. The problem is when you play behind a mediocre offensive line and when you play in a passing attack that's inconsistent with a ton of wide receiver injuries and teams can key in on you, you're going to end up being 3 yards in a cloud of dust all too often. Have the circumstances changed enough that you think that Saquon Barkley can be a much more efficient player? I
think so. We just talked about the improved circumstances. And here's the thing. He came out last season and got a lot of volume in weeks 1 and 2. You're like, okay, we're coming off the injury. We thought it might be a slow start. But by like week 2, 3, he was getting, 90% of the snaps. He was a top 10 running back in week 3 and 4. We just talked about Daniel Jones coming out strong. He was playing well. And then he stepped on the guy's foot. Yeah. Remember the injury that he had? Just a freak thing. He just stepped on someone's foot, hurt his ankle, was out, and that was it. Then the offense fell apart. Everything was a disaster. So he might have had a really good year last year. I mean, things were certainly trending like that after a month. So there's still a reason for optimism. He's still going to be a super high volume player. And by the way, they didn't go out this offseason and say, you know what? We can't count on him. We need to go out and get another running back. It's Matt Breida, who's a career, good player, fast, but a depth player, right? A situational change of pace back. Gary Brightwell, that's their depth at running back. They have not addressed that, and it's obviously not a priority. So I still think he'll be the main guy by far, clearly a feature back, one of the few in the league involved in the passing game. The team will be better. They have 2 good offensive tackles now. I think there's reason for optimism that he can get back in there. Now I have him RB15, so I am baking in some risk here and the shaky offense overall. But I think he has his best year in 3 years.
Yeah, and I think this is a much easier decision this time around because last year, anybody who took him at RB5 or even RB7 was doing so with some trepidation because they knew there was major injury risk. And also at the time last year, the excitement surrounding Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator is not nearly the same as what it is with Mike Kafka as their offensive coordinator and Brian Daboll as their head coach. But injuries are real, and I think some people will point to the fact, and there are maybe other reasons to explain this, but Devontae Booker, definitely a less talented player overall. When he stepped in last year, was a far more efficient player than Saquon Barkley. Is that a red flag? Maybe a little bit, but at cost, it's far less of a concern for me. His 8 is, again, running back 16. At that point, we talked about Cam Akers earlier on in the show.
Yep.
He might be, probably not, but might be a little bit of a timeshare. You're talking about guys who play by, Antonio Gibson, we discussed yesterday on the show, timeshare as well, limited passing game. So it gets ugly quickly at running back. Saquon's still in that viable starting running back category.
Field, I want to ask really quickly with Brian Daboll coming over and installing a new offense, how has he utilized running backs in the past? Because coming from Buffalo, it was a different setup, right? He never had a running back like Saquon. So this is sort of we're projecting a little bit here, right?
Here's the problem I have sometimes with using past performance for coordinators to assess exactly how they are going to be as either head coaches or coordinators somewhere else. If you go back and watch, I went back this morning and read some of the articles when Brian Daboll was hired as the Bills offensive coordinator. Most of them were something to the effect of, holy bleep, what have the Bills done? Why are they ruining Josh Allen? Brian Daboll been a coordinator 3 times prior to that. Let me get the numbers because Kyle pulled them for me. 2009, he had the 32nd ranked offense. 2010, 30th ranked offense. 2011, 19th. 2012, 32nd. Those were his 3 tenures as an offensive coordinator prior to being hired by the Bills. So there are elements of what Brian Daboll has done in the past that I am willing to look at and feel strong about. But specific to running back usage, I don't know. Because the Bills have a very different back than Saquon Barkley. They have one of the pass-heaviest offenses in the NFL because they have one of the best quarterbacks and best wide receivers in the NFL. So I'm not sure what to make of Brian Daboll's usage of running backs as it pertains to Saquon.
Yeah, and I think they first of all, we saw him use Devin Singletary. He emerged as their clear lead back last year, and he used him that way, right? So it's not like a New England situation where no matter what, we're rotating in 3 guys, right? He showed that he would do that recently. And also, again, they did not address the position in the offseason, right? It should be the Barkley backfield.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some pass catchers then.
Yes.
So I would argue, and Mike, again, you chime in here if you feel differently, that if you're going to invest in a Giants pass catcher, you're sort of you must choose one. You kind of have to plant your flag on one during the preseason because I just don't know that this passing offense is going to be efficient or effective enough to sustain multiple. And B, they each present such different cases, in my opinion. Would you disagree with that?
No, it's a tricky situation for sure, for a variety of reasons, not, including the fact that they've all had injury issues. Right. Kadarius Toney last year, Kenny Golladay, of course, the last couple of years. Sterling Shepard's not going to play for a while. Darius Slay may not make this team.
Wan'Dale
Robinson's super undersized. There's a lot of concerns, and that's a lot of mouths to feed as well. But if I'm picking one, it's an easy call for me. I'm going to take the guy they picked in the first round last year who had a game last season.
That's Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, Kadarius Toney. He had a game last season in week 5. He had 189 receiving yards, right? 7th most by a rookie receiver over the past 20 years. Yeah. I mean, he showed his ceiling in that game. If he could have just stayed on the field, the production he could have put up last year, I mean, he'd be going way earlier in drafts. He looked like a superstar at times last season, and it didn't come together. He just couldn't stay out there, but I'm optimistic about him. We already addressed some of the concerns with the offense, but he would be the guy for sure that I would pick.
Yeah, we all landed on the same spot here in terms of a Giants wide receiver that if you're going to take one and you can only choose one, it's Kadarius Toney. And it's not that guys like Kenny Golladay or Sterling Shepard can't have good seasons. It's just what's most likely. And Kadarius Toney, who cracks the top 45 for wide receivers in our ranks, is my pick as well. Mike, you referenced that game, 189 yards in that game. I'm going to see if I can find the post. Maybe I have Jackson tweeted from @FantasyFocus. I put together a video last year of a game in which Kadarius Toney against the Saints had 3 touches, and he might have run like 150 yards on his first 3 touches. And it wasn't like he was running backwards like he used to be able to do in Madden, and you could just turn around and pick up 50 yards on a play. It was like he was navigating through traffic in a way that few players in the league could do. It looked like Percy Harvin to me. That's the kind of potential player he can be utilized as. I am excited about the opportunity here for Kadarius Toney. It may not matter as much in redraft leagues, but this is a huge year for his dynasty value going forward, because if the Giants tap into him, Toney, who slid a little bit last year in in dynasty drafts because he was hurt in the preseason, could catapult up into the category of guys who were drafted in the first round of a real NFL draft last year too.
Mm-hmm. Can I say something really quick? Just to close it out.
Yeah.
I am also super on Kadarius Toney over Kenny Golladay for one main reason. When I look at Kenny Golladay last year, he had 4 games in which he had 8 targets. He never even had more than 8 targets. 4 games where he maxed out at 8 targets. Kadarius Toney had played basically half the season. He had already 4 games over those 8 targets. He's just going to be the guy that I think is going to have the ball in his hands more often. Therefore, he's just more explosive, more opportunities in this offense.
This is an obscure reference, and I'm not suggesting this is what's going to happen, but part of the argument in favor of Allen Robinson for the Rams this year has been, look at the contract, right? Kenny Golladay and Allen Robinson had similar deficiencies when they hit free agency. Not great separators, not elite athletes, but guys who in the past have been always good in 50-50 situations and good touchdown makers. Okay, Kenny Golladay went to an absolute mess in New York. I think he's an inferior player to Allen Robinson on the whole. I think that Daniel Jones is obviously nowhere close to Matthew Stafford. But just like as you think about the Allen Robinson decision, sometimes like the money matters to me, but it's not always a tell-all, right? And Kenny Golladay is an example. The money is not always a tell-all for a player. 4 years, $72 million looked ill-fated when they made the decision. It looks way worse right now because it's a ton of money for a guy that, unless they want to trade him for like a late round pick, is probably not movable.
Yeah, by the way, we were talking about like the volatility of touchdowns, right? 2019, Kenny Golladay led the NFL in touchdowns.
Yeah.
Last season, 37. He had 0 last year. He had 0 last year. 37 players last year had at least 9 end zone targets. He's the only one that didn't catch one. Wow. The only one out of 37 players.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
again, to an extent, that's bad
With his
luck, right?
big
He has been
6'4"
good in that
body.
department. He has been good in that department.
All right, so anything, I should have probably asked this for both teams, but just like, is there any player that we did not mention for the Eagles or the Giants that you want to address, acknowledge, etc.?
Not buying Quez Watkins hype. I've seen him as a late round fly. I don't like that. But Wan'Dale Robinson trending up, looking good in camp. He's a name to watch too. 12-team leagues. I take a flyer there.
I am so scared to draft a guy that is 5 foot. Just like the idea of those little wide receivers, those little it's tough for me.
I have a fun player.
Yeah.
Second round pick out of Kentucky for those unacquainted. We're going to come. Let's get right to it. Do a little name game. How about that?
Yeah.
Shall we? But we will do that in just 1 second. But first, a word from our friends at Comedy Central. I think we should get live stream on Comedy Central one day.
I agree.
Fit in, right? We're funny. Mike is funny, at least. Is the news terrorizing your timeline? Is the Supreme Court causing your anxiety to rise higher than gas prices? Is the whole world feeling as unpredictable as cryptocurrency? Hey, you're not alone. Charlemagne the God is here to help. I mean, not really. There's nothing he can do. He's just one man, despite his name. But you can watch his show, Comedy Central's Hell of a Week. He'll be chopping it up with the best and brightest comedians, political figures, and cultural influencers to talk to you through the biggest stories of the hell of a week that just was. Charlemagne the God gives you his unfiltered and unapologetically honest takes as he tackles issues rooted in politics and culture on this late-night talk show. Hell, he may be hot, but Charlemagne the God takes are even hotter. He's dishing out pure honesty with a heavy helping of comedy. Come get the week's last laugh with Charlemagne the God, because if you're living in the same world he is, it's been a hell of a week. Seriously. Comedy Central's Hell of a Week with Charlemagne the God, Thursdays at 11:30, 10:30 Central Time. That started last week, July 28th. That means you can watch it again tomorrow, August 4th on Comedy Central, TV 14.
All right, so I'd say A-.
You have an A- on that? No way.
Look, this is a Disney show. You said hell like 4 times.
A
Didn't
bunch
care
of
for
times.
that at all.
Yeah,
But
double hockey
little
sticks,
little
my bad.
improving in
Yeah.
there, which was good. So I'll say A-. For that.
Okay.
Really good. Really
I'll take
good.
it. Yep.
Well done.
25 cents
Best
a
of the
letter,
day.
though. You owe Mama Dop $4. Just you can Venmo her whenever you want. Just so you know.
Mama Dopp in on the YouTube stream.
Yes. Oh, is she?
Yes.
I love it.
Watch us daily.
I love it.
Or
Let's do the name game
substream.
segment. How
Okay,
does it
let's do
sound?
Sounds great.
I want to talk about some players here. We did this yesterday. I'm excited to be able to do this today. So we talked about the Giants. We talked about the Eagles. And now I want to compare those players outside of just this team, right?
Okay.
So
All right.
Saquon Barkley. Mike, you've got him at 15. Field, you've got him at 20. ESPN consensus is 17. Would you rather have Saquon Barkley or the running back we talked about yesterday, Ezekiel Elliott?
I will take. I think my rankings are accurate here. I will take Zeke Elliott over Saquon Barkley.
Oh, yeah?
And, yeah, I would. And I understand that like Zeke, one of the things I mentioned yesterday, Zeke not likely to hit a home run anymore. Saquon a much better home run hitter, but Zeke plays what I think is a better offensive line, better quarterback. I think the opportunities for short touchdowns are greater in Dallas than they are in New York.
I'll go Barkley. I have Zeke at 20. I'm low on him. We've talked about him on the pod before. Tony Pollard trending up. Zeke did not play particularly well last year, trending down. I don't think that changes with all the workload Zeke has had. I just think he's kind of maxed out. He hasn't been that good the last couple of years. I think it's Barkley.
All right. What about Saquon or Cam Akers coming back from injury from last season?
Yeah, I'll go Akers here by 1 spot. I have him 1 ahead. I talked all about him earlier, so I'll lean that way.
Yeah, Cam Akers as well. I think that just really good talent and a great offense, opportunity for touchdowns.
All right. How about James Conner? Somebody that had we're looking at touchdown regression happening this year, but is he still going to have enough volume and enough workload? You'd rather have him over Saquon?
I think so, even with the touchdown regression baked in, but really good pass catcher, had over 9 yards per catch last year, did James Conner. Good in the screen game. And Mike mentioned how the Giants running back depth, not exactly imposing. Same thing for the Cardinals. Darrell Williams, Eno Benjamin amongst the names to know. I think James Conner's clearly the guy.
Yeah, we had 12 carries from the 1 yard line last year. No one else had more than 9. That's not going to change, right? Still very good offense. He'll get a lot of touchdowns and should have overall volume increase, right? So I agree. I have Conner ahead.
All right, Mike, last one here for Saquon Barkley. How about Nick Chubb?
I'm going to go Barkley here. Know, if you look at the games that Chubb has played with Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb has handled 55% of the carries and 5% of the targets. I'm worried about that. You're banking too much on elite efficiency for a guy that's now, I believe, 27 years old. Has missed quite a few games the last couple of years. I like him. Chubb is a terrific runner, but in PPR, it bothers me.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned. I've got Chubb over Saquon Barkley. I think we're talking about like a floor of 1,200 rushing yards for Nick Chubb. Maybe, and before Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry fans get mad at me, maybe the best pure runner in the NFL. The age does not concern me. I got Chubb.
Totally. 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns, 12 catches. Probably seems about in line for Nick Chubb. Let's talk about Miles.
Right.
You know what? Honestly, let's talk about Miles Sanders. We're going to move back a little bit in the rankings. We talked about him, obviously, with the Eagles. Miles Sanders right now, ESPN consensus is running back 25. So would you take Miles Sanders or new Jaguars second-year rookie, Travis Etienne?
Did that make sense?
Yes, it did.
Travis Etienne for me, the Jaguars were very busy this offseason. Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram added amongst other players. But I think there's a chance that the best, most talented skill guy on their offense, other than Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and a ton of pass catching.
Yeah, I'm going Sanders by 1 spot here. Very close. If the reports weren't as positive on James Robinson, I might lean the other way. But Robinson seems like he's going to play pretty early. And if you listen to Doug Peterson, he's going to have a substantial role. So love Etienne. Don't get me wrong. Love him. I think he'll be a superstar in this league. But for now, I think it's Sanders.
Sanders. All right. What about Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that Kansas City offense? They signed Ronald Jones. Curious what a lot of points scored in that offense, but CEH has been a little bit of a disappointment. Between the two, Mike, who would you rather take?
I'm going Sanders here for sure. Right? CEH last year with not much competition was 22nd in points per game. Even if you take out the game he left injured, and plus Jerick McKinnon dominated the touches. He's back in the playoffs. He dominated the touches. They bring in Ronald Jones. I think there's optimism. Edwards-Helaire can break out, bounce back, but there's too much risk there. I'd go Sanders.
I've got Miles Sanders as well over CEH. The optimism for CEH is that he was playing, I think it was an appendectomy like right before training camp last year. He had something that he was dealing with. He lost a ton of weight right before the season. Never seemed to get back to 100% fully during the year. That being said, like he's had a golden opportunity for the past 2 years and has not capitalized. And as Mike mentioned, there is more competition in the backfield than less as compared to past couple of years.
Yep. All right. Last one for Miles Sanders Field. Cordero Patterson. Right now, ADP is 31 on ESPN. Would you rather have Cordero Patterson or Miles Sanders?
Yeah, this one is tough. I've got Miles Sanders ahead of him by one spot. I've got Patterson at 27, Sanders at 26. Patterson was a unicorn last year. I just don't know, even with the recommitment and free agency from Atlanta, are they just as likely to run him back as a runner as frequently as they were? They did draft Tyler Algier out of BYU in the 5th round. He's, I think, a capable enough guy. And I just feel like, Mike is the king of telling you things that are sustainable versus not. And I sense that some of Patterson's almost unfathomable efficiency last year is just not sustainable.
Yeah, so I'm going to go Sanders here, but Patterson's plummeting in drafts. I think he's kind of becoming a value play right now because he still is going to play a big role in that backfield. He's going to score some touchdowns. He's good size. He's going to be involved in the passing game. So, I've seen him. I don't know about you. I know you do a lot of drafts as well, falling to the 9th, 10th round. I mean, there's some appeal there for me.
Very late.
Good 0 RB target.
Yes,
going that
for
way.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about DeVonta Smith, another wide receiver. Really tough with where he falls, even though there's so many good wide receivers. DeVonta Smith right now, ADP for ESPN, is wide receiver 38. Would you rather have him, Field Yates, or Adam Thielen?
Yeah, I think speaking of a guy who's plummeting, Adam Thielen.
Yes.
Look at the first half of last year, and he was outpacing Justin Jefferson in targets. He's one of the best touchdown scorers in the NFL, and that has held up over a long enough period of time that I think there's some skill to it. High end zone target share usually, and I think this offense is going to pass the ball a ton.
Yeah, so the first 11 games of last season, how many more fantasy points do you think Justin Jefferson had than Adam Thielen?
10?
14.
Like
yeah. It was that close. I mean, he was wide receiver 7.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the age. He's going to turn 32 in, I believe, September. That bothers me a little bit. Irv Smith's back, obviously. So I have him in the 30s, but he could beat that. If he stays healthy this season, he'll beat that. I'll finish in the 20s or teens even.
Should be a really great passing
my
offense
answer,
this year.
right? I'm actually going Thielen. I have him slightly ahead.
Okay, love it. What about Rashad Bateman, Mike? No Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, so I have Smith one spot ahead here of Rashad Bateman. Very close. You're taking a shot on a high pedigree, recent first round pick from last year. Bateman's a 1, Smith's a 2. It's close, but I'm just worried about how much volume will be in that Baltimore passing game.
Yeah, I flipped him. I've got Bateman one spot ahead of DeVonta Smith. Not much to add that Mike didn't cover there, but I do like Bateman this year. Talented guy. I think that and has a better chance to lead his team in wide receiver targets than DeVonta does.
All right, last one I have. DeAndre Hopkins,
Yeah.
6-game suspension, which is the hard part to be able to figure out. Right now, you guys both have him as wide receiver 41.
Mm-hmm. This is a draft theory question, Mike. How do you have it? So we both have him behind DeVonta Smith, excuse me. If this was week 7 on, I think we would both clearly value DeAndre Hopkins ahead of DeVonta Smith, but that's over a third of the year. You're not going to have DeAndre available plus a bye week. That's tough. That's just a lot of time to miss.
Yep.
Yeah, not to mention that he averaged 6.1 targets per game last season. A huge drop. He's 30 years old. Does that go up? No.
He's the one
Marquise
where
Brown there, Zach Ertz now.
The age probably concerns me a bit more.
Yeah.
We started to see careful now.
Uh-oh.
I still love DeAndre Hopkins. He got a 97 rating on Madden, and I'm not saying this is blasphemous. I'm just saying Mike pointed it out, the numbers, and I think it aligned with some of the things that we saw. He was never a huge yak guy, never a huge explosive play guy, but I saw some signs last year of a slightly different player than we were accustomed to for a long time.
Yeah, I'm not interested at all. I just won't be drafting him.
All right. We're going to do some listener questions from YouTube, and our questions are going to be brought to you by Geico. Switch to Geico today and see all the ways that you could save.
All righty. Do you have them, Daniel?
I certainly do. First question comes from Shayla Cox. Wants to know, how do you move on from an undefeated season where you lost in the championship by 1 point?
Wow.
I need some major motivation heading into this season.
You call Tom Brady or Bill Belichick and you ask him what it was like back in 2007. You know what? You call me. You know why? I was on the sidelines for that game. There was a legendary photo of me. This was back in my Patriots days when I was still working there.
You're like
of
16
me.
back then,
if
right?
You're on the YouTube stream, so you're watching this. I had my shirt in my mouth.
I
was so
love it.
nervous. It was like Belichick, Randy Moss, and me. Go Google the photo. You'll find it somewhere.
That's
I am
incredible.
sure. So you put your head down and you just come back for more, and you turn that undefeated season with a loss at the end of it into an undefeated season with a win at the end of it.
I was going to say draft better, but I like his answer better. I think Fields did a better job.
I'll never forget this.
What
Oh my
he,
God,
so
the
what he
bus
said.
was so weird. It was the weirdest. Like after the game, like we're on the team bus, and Logan Mankins, great guard for a long time, had grown out the world's bushiest beard, bushier than Daniel's beard, and we're sitting there, no one's saying a word, and all of a sudden you just hear. Bzzz. He had no idea what to do with himself. He just started shaving his beard on the bus.
Just
Just like the clippings just fell on the floor, and no one's going to question him. He's like the toughest guy on the team, anyways.
All right, we just need to do Field story time from now
Yes,
on.
we do. I'm in on that. All right, here's another question. Johnny Leckler wants to know if Will Fuller signs with Dallas or with any other team for that. Where would you rank Will Fuller?
I would think it's unlikely he signs with the team before the season.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, if he does sign somewhere, I would say 12-team leagues, late round flyer. That's it. He's barely played the last couple of seasons. Even before that, he had so many injury issues. It bothers me. The guy is so good, though. So I'd still consider him late in a 12-team draft, but I have major concerns for obvious reasons.
Fair. All right, last one we have here comes from Andrew Wright. 12-team PPR keeper league. You get to keep one. Are you going to keep Christian McCaffrey?
Okay.
Yes.
Or Jamar Chase?
All right, so
You already said yes. It's too late.
McCaffrey. I mean, McCaffrey, because it's a one keeper, right? Like it's a season-long draft. It's not even really a keeper draft. It's
Yeah,
just,
I
it's
mean, I could
basically
make
season-long.
I think I might. You said Jamar Chase or Chris McCaffrey. That was right. I actually would make the case for Jamar Chase because it's in effect like a one-player dynasty league, right? Because it's like, I'll just keep Jamar Chase this year and every other year
And
for the next
year.
10.
And yeah.
So I would lean towards Jamar Chase just for that reason.
Yeah, it's totally fair. It's close, but to me, keep one with no like rounds in mind. Things could change so quickly. I just want to keep the guy I want first this year, and it's McCaffrey.
Yeah, you're banking on having at least one good pick this next year.
Yeah. You might have one or two, maybe three really good seasons out of McCaffrey too. But again, it's two great options. It's two elite options
Yes.
here. There's no real wrong answer. I would just go
I'm
with
right,
McCaffrey.
but there's no wrong answer.
We're in a spot, guys, where tomorrow, Mike, you're not going to be here, but we are going to have the wonderful, incredible Stefania Bell, who has been doing some camp stuff. Field, we're going to talk with her about what's going on tomorrow.
Awesome.
I'm really excited about that. We're going to dive into some injuries. I appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah, I will. I'll be swimming tomorrow, and then I'll see you Friday.
Wow. Mike is going to be hammered during the live stream tomorrow, watching us, not actually on the show.
Yeah, hey, I'm into that.
It's true. I'll
That's
put
right.
it on.
Just
Maybe
have yourself a Miller Lite and you're good.
TV.
Miller Lite Mike.
That's right.
Let's go.
Hey!
We're doing it. Miller Lite Mike. That's it.
We're
Do
back
I
on
get-
Thursday. Rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast.
Do I get kickbacks for that? Like
No,
Yeah, totally.
that
definitely
name?
not.
If I carry that name around?
Yeah, why not?
All right, let's do it.
Only if
Let's
you get
work
it
that out.
tattooed on you.
You make some calls for me?
Yeah.
How many tattoos do you have?
I have 0.
Not
Your
enough.
game.